Greetings and welcome to today's C# coding session thingy. Um, we are working on a Minecraft server launcher slash management tool. Um, and last time we kind of looked at perhaps doing some UI changes. At the moment, while we do have basically all the or most of the options that we want to have access to be able to properly configure everything and set up custom messages and such. It has kind of grown into layers upon layers upon layers of configuration dialogues and windows and whatnot. Um, I've been going through the entire setup, and I think that the approach that I kind of went towards on Wednesday um, will probably be the way that we end up setting this up. Basically, the idea is to grab all of these layers upon layers of configuration dialogues and migrate all of them into a single window that then makes use of tabs instead. So we can basically access all of the different configuration options simply by selecting a different tab within the same window. Um, and in doing so, it should be a little less involved getting everything configured, so we can get things running properly. Um, I've also been considering basically redoing this entire main UI setup. Perhaps give it a little more spin along the lines of what the game client looks like. Maybe even implement some custom rendered uh, buttons that look a little more like the game client buttons do, um, by means of basically grabbing the real button textures from the game client itself, and then see if I can implement some kind of I don't know, rendering class or whatever to handle those buttons. Just to get a more customized feel to the entire UI setup. It's fairly easy and quick to build a UI using all of the standard Windows controls and have them basically adopt whatever surface Windows currently has, depending on which version of Windows, of course. But when you want to do something a little beyond the standardized desktop look, you kind of need to figure out exactly what you want it to look like and then implement something to actually be able to handle it. And that can be a little bit tedious doing. In any case, today and probably a few more streaming sessions will be all about revamping the entire UI for all of the different interfaces that make up this entire application. So that's basically what we will be doing. Kind of want to get rid of this user control as well. So we'll see if we can do something about all this stuff. Now, previously, I went ahead and unpacked or decompressed the entire game client just to get a hold of all the different textures and assets and whatnot that make up the game. And in the GUI folder, we have all the different buttons and icons and whatnot, and among those also this widget texture atlas. And this one contains the textures that make up the standard buttons that are used throughout the game client. And I'm kind of thinking about grabbing those textures and combining them with our custom Minecraft font renderer, so we can construct the actual buttons that we have in use currently. The add server profile, edit of a server profile, removal, start, stop, schedule, all that stuff. So we have something that looks a little more like what the game is actually, or what the game actually looks like. So that's part of what I've been considering doing. Whether we should invest this much time in doing this stuff for basically such a simplistic application can be debated, but I guess it doesn't hurt when things look nice. So we'll attack the problem from that point of view. We all like something nice to look at, and doing custom user interfaces, well, it's not something that a lot of people spend a lot of time doing, but we'll see about investing some time in constructing a better UI for this setup. Hiya, Matt. Welcome to the stream. Let's see. We definitely need a completely new configuration dialog or window of sorts, and then we'll go from there, I think. So let's get a fresh one up. Yeah, we'll just now hang on a second. Server config and server profile config. We'll just do config dialog. That should be enough. Add, and we'll do config dialog, since this one will contain all of the elements that are configurable for each individual server profile, including the schedules and the actual reference to where the Minecraft server is and all that stuff. Everything will go in here eventually. So we will migrate all of it over here and then see about adding some extra custom stuff to it so it looks a little nicer. Let's see, we need to change the background color at least. I think we used, was it this one? Yeah, that one. All right. For this window, we definitely don't need the minimize and maximize. We can also set the, yeah, we'll do fixed dialog. That should be fine. Remove the minimize and the maximize button since we don't need them. And then we'll see about getting this set up. Get things arranged here like I always do. There we go. And this would be the form events. And there. All right. So we may end up doing some custom rendering on this new configuration dialog as well, possibly to include the custom text handler for the custom messages and the custom MOTD. We could potentially embed that as part of this config dialog and then simply just shift the other configuration elements around a little bit to make room for the custom text rendering when, say, for example, the MOTD text box gets focus. We could add in some overlay panels containing the colors and text formatting and the actual rendering of it to kind of give us direct access to it, so we don't have to pop it up in a separate window. We'll see where we end up going with this. And yeah, we definitely need some coffee. Ooh, strong one. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's start this up again quick. See, we do have quite a few different options that we need to implement as part of this new configuration dialogs setup. So part of it is, of course, the initial server information regarding where the Minecraft server resides, how much memory we want to set aside for Java to run it, and so on. All of that is part of the base setup of each individual configuration profile. And apart from that, the next section is, of course, the contents of the server profile, the server properties file that belongs to each individual server instance. And finally, the entire scheduling setup for maintenance restarts and maintenance shutdown for doing the daily backups, stuff like that. So the new dialog will be at least a three-part setup. So that's definitely something that we need to keep in mind. For some of these things, we still may want to make use of the standard drop-down boxes like these, or we could go and do some other custom setups for them. Kind of depends where we want to go with the new setup, but I guess we'll figure it out as we build it. Okay. Let's see. Now we do have some controls available for setting up tabs that we could make use of. They honestly don't look all that great when you put on custom coloring like we've done here. This is basically what it looks like. So the question is whether we should go ahead and do some custom handling of it in terms of perhaps rendering a custom tab system as graphics, or just make use of the built-in ones. I think we'll go with some custom rendering stuff just to make it a little more fitting to the current setup that we've got. So we'll get rid of this and then we'll do some custom stuff on here. Um, Now we could potentially do some of these things by means of, let's see, get rid of this. This would be the server properties setup. I will definitely grab things like text boxes, the numeric up downs, the check boxes, make use of those. But I think all of the current groups that we're using to kind of segment part of the setup, we may want to do some custom setups for those just to make it look a little nicer than it does already. It kind of looks weirdly yeah, I don't know. It looks weird to me with these strange borders that the group boxes construct. I know that they make them look like this because they are basically rendering the 3D effect of the border by using the system colors to kind of make up those borders. And if we take a quick look at them and set this back to the regular control, like so, and then have a good look at it, we can see that it's making use of the brighter and the darker shades to kind of make that border look sort of inset a little bit. For our purposes, it just looks like kind of a white, weirdly shaped border, I guess, when we set the custom background color. So we might want to consider doing that, doing something completely different to kind of segment things in, so we can make it look a little nicer. Now, for a tab setup, we will probably run into some amount of messing about with text placements and whether we should use labels or forego them and just render the text. Guess part of it would, well, let's see. I guess we could just use the standard setups. It'll be a lot of custom handling if we do a completely customized setup. So, and I don't really want to have this project go on for another 6 or 8 months. So, yeah, I guess we'll just use some of the built-in stuff and then take it from there. At least by doing that, we can drop some of the components into the individual tab pages and then kind of enclose them there like this, and then do all of the individual control setup inside and take it from there. Yeah, I think we'll do it that way. It'll make part of our life a little easier because we then don't have to basically compile and run the program to see if we got this little aspect of the UI positioned correctly when basically building the entire UI surface from code. So we'll just use the standard stuff and leave it at that, I think. Um, yeah, we'll go with that. Okay, back color we need to set to our gray color, and then we'll need to get these fixed as well. So let's get the tab pages set up. Let's see. This would be the yeah, we'll call this profile, and we'll call this one settings, and we'll add another page to it called schedule. There we go. And then we'll change this one again, just like the other ones. There. Yeah, that should be fine. And then we'll basically grab all of the setups from the other windows and migrate them all into this one setup instead. And then go from there. All right. I kind of want to keep the old accept and cancel or OK cancel setup so we can so we still have the option to abandon whatever changes to the entire configuration might have been made, and thereby basically giving us the real option to cancel. I know that it has kind of grown into a trend that everything autosaves and should autosave. Personally, for some things, I don't think it's all that great an idea, simply because in certain circumstances you may not want those particular settings saved until you're absolutely sure that this particular configuration is correct. So I guess it depends on the circumstances. And for this, I firmly believe that we should still keep the option to cancel part or the entire configuration setup. It should be something that we can cancel. So we'll leave it with that. Okay, let's grab the other configuration, which is this one. This one lets us specify a custom name for the server profile. It lets us specify where the jar is, how much memory to set aside, and whether to auto start it. And from there we can manipulate the settings of the server itself. Now, if we go out and select a pre-existing server jar that already has a server properties file, then the instant we basically click on the settings tab, we could easily load up the configuration, or we can load it up as part of the path selection, so we can internally handle all those settings accordingly. So we'll see if we can get some of that stuff working. As part of the main profile itself, I guess we potentially could do something along the lines of, let's see, graphics, UI samples. See, this is how the multiplayer list, or what the multiplayer list looks like. And part of these the settings that we can manipulate as part of the configuration for each individual server profile is that we can mess with, for example, the title of the server for the profile. That's strictly for us to be able to identify each individual one. We'll be able to change the MOTD, either leave it as standard plain text or give us the option to build in a split line setup with custom coloring and stuff, just like in this example. Um, but in terms of how we currently present all of this information and what our current UI looks like, it's fairly plain compared to how colorful, I guess, the game client shows up those profiles. And I'm kind of considering adding in basically a small, let's see, um, surface that presents the individual server profile basically the same way as the game client does. So we can see what it will look like as we are editing those particular parts of it. Um, so question is whether it's too much effort. Um, I guess we could do that. Let's see, how big is that image actually? These are 608 by 72. Let's see. Well, let's see, we'll put a picture box up here quick and then set this to something different so we know where it is and make it the appropriate size so we can see exactly how much space it takes up. So kind of thinking if we do maybe the individual server profile setups at the top like this and then the rest of the configuration below, and then basically use this green area up here to I guess render what the server profile looks like, including its configuration and stuff. I don't know. I'm just currently going through the motions of mentally trying out different ideas for the future layout of the configuration stuff as well as the main UI. Just to see what kind of feel we can get from this setup. Let's see. Well, if we compare these, we can definitely see that the profiles on the main UI at the moment, they size-wise don't exactly fit the size of the game client's UI. And if we want to put in those custom rendered MOTD messages as part of the main UI, I'm kind of thinking that it would still be more interesting to do a fully customized rendering of it, though that might prove to become a problem in terms of being able to render the port configuration. Seeing as this setup doesn't leave much room for that piece of information. Unless, of course, we increase the height of it a little bit, I guess. We could do that. Mm, good question. See, I kind of want to put the actually rendered setup on the main form here, including all that extra MOTD rendering stuff, and then maybe forgo listing the port for it. Port configuration for the game client. Well, it's part of the main settings for it, I guess. Don't know how relevant that is. Um, yeah, whatever. We'll go through it and see where we end up. Um, For to begin with, I definitely want to see if I can gather all of the settings into one window instead of having multiple levels of nested windows with all the different configuration options. So it'll be more difficult to, in its current form, it's more difficult to find one specific setup option where it will be easier for us to find a specific setting if we only have to look through one dialog instead of having to look through three of them. So we'll definitely make sure that we get all of the different configuration options put in here, and then we'll figure out afterwards what kind of extra presentation we will be adding to make it look nice. So we'll take it from there. Okay. Let's see. We will end up having 3 different tabs. So we'll kind of try and group things together depending on which tab the controls belong to. So there will be one for the profile tab. There will be one for the settings tab. This is for server properties. This is for our configuration thing. And finally, the scheduled stuff, which is also housed. Schedules are located in our configuration file. So, all right. So these are definitely things that we need to get in there, and then grab them from the other setups. So in here we need to keep the our configuration file going, and we also need to keep the server properties configuration going. So we'll kind of need to house 2 sets of configuration files to keep this stuff functional. And we definitely need to let those settings be handled by the accept button in terms of applying whatever changes might have been made to the entire setup. Now, when it comes to specifying an existing Minecraft server folder, we kind of need to do a search and figure out whether an existing server properties file is there, loaded up, but not apply any changes to it until the accept button is clicked. So we'll have to implement some extra stuff there. Hey Yos, good to see you again. Um, all right, let's get some stuff dumped on here, and then we'll figure out how to make it look nice afterwards. Hang on a second. I think I will go here and specify this for color instead. Then every following element should inherit the color settings from the tab container, like so. We also need, first of all, this would be the server profile name. Um, blah blah blah. Yeah, I guess we'll call it profile name. That's fine. We need a text box in here, like so. Ew. And we definitely need to customize these as well to make them look a little better. So we'll put a gray background on it. We'll change the border style to fixed single, and then that will have it inherit or make use of some um, way of shading the border color, because for some reason we can't specify that. But we definitely also need to customize the forecolor of the text box, like so. So now we'll have a white text on the dark gray background that should make it fairly visible. And this would be the server profile name, like so. Basically here we are recreating, not this one, we're recreating this one. Um, hmm, Actually, I'm kind of thinking about maybe getting rid of the entire schedule tab and then just putting all the schedule stuff inside the profile setup instead, maybe? Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, we'll see. We definitely need to be able to at least show where the server resides. So let's go with server profile path, and um, um, let's see, server name, server path, server jar. Yeah, I guess we can use those. Yeah, we'll use those. Um, Server name. We'll do something similar to the other one. Whoops. Server path. And then is it being derpy? Huh. Um, oh well, I guess. Sorry. Dum dum dum. Yeah, let's get this back on track. Sorry, I'm a little distracted today. Yeah. Should we use a text box here or just put a label on? Nah, we'll use the text box and set it to read only. That way at least we can limit how much space it takes up. And then, of course, the server jar needs to be in here as well. Server jar. And yes, I know I need to rename these. So we can get them correctly set up, server path. And this one needs to be, let's see, read only. And the same for this one. Right there. All right. So that takes care of the very basics. We still need to add in the select button for finding and picking the server thingamajig. To get rid of this quick. And then add in some of the other stuff that we can set up here. I'm not quite sure yet whether I want to put in or move all of the schedule stuff to this initial profile setup. On one hand, I kind of want to keep it separate. On the other hand, I guess it would be kind of neat having all of it in one place. But yeah, nah, we'll keep the schedule stuff separate. And then this initial Autostart thing will move over to the schedule setup. Because the scheduling stuff would be, no, actually, come to think of it, the Autostart feature, which we currently haven't implemented at all, that kind of links to whether the Minecraft server should be automatically started up whenever our server launcher starts. So that kind of needs to be set aside with the actual server profile itself, and then we'll add in some mechanisms to basically start these servers up in the order they are listed on the main form. Speaking of, I also want to add in a feature that would let us arrange the order of the server profiles. So right now it basically lists these profiles in the exact order they were created. So we might want to add in an option where we can rearrange the order of the server profiles. Don't know. We'll see. In any case, I kind of want to move this down a little bit. Then we need to add in a button. Actually, I kind of want to see if we can, yeah, I'm getting a little bit sidetracked here because I would actually like to see if I can do a different version of our flat button setup, but have it be based on a regular button, but allow us to do custom rendering of the surface of the button. Because at the moment, as we can see here, this custom button that we made a while back doesn't exactly behave like a regular button does in terms of putting the correct label on. So I actually want to sidetrack a little bit and see if we can come up with a better solution to that, so we can keep the standard Windows button behavior, but have our custom looks of it be applied to it instead. So let's see if we can do that. Yeah, let's get a fresh. Actually, this inherits from the user control stuff. So the question is whether we can I wonder if we can extend it, maybe. Hmm. Never mind. Ah, we'll leave it at that. Whatever. Anyways, actually we need to get this one moved up here because it does belong in the dialogs folder like that. Okay. Yeah, we'll mess with some of this stuff. That would be this one. Still need to be able to select where the server resides. We'll put a standard button on there. Select server. Select server path, I guess. Or just server. No, we'll call it select server. Then we need to set the foreground back to control text to get it to look right, so it's readable, and we'll put in like so. That should be fine. We need the checkbox that lets us configure whether Autostart server at Autostart server should be fine. Pardon the Danish for a moment. Jeg er i gang med at bygge en launcher til Minecraft server. Lige nu er jeg i gang med at lave om i hele brugerfladen til opsætningen. Basically, the entire configuration setup needs to be revamped a little bit. So I'm kind of pinging back and forth with different design ideas to try and work out exactly how I want to design the new UI setup. But for the moment, I'll just make sure that all the different components are added in, and then take it from there. And then see how much of it needs to be changed. All right. Autostart server when launcher starts. There we go. That one needs to be set up. Before that one, we probably want to set up the memory configuration for Java. Memory size. Um, let's see. What did it look like before it just said memory? Yeah, we'll add a label after it describing what it's for. Memory. And for this we need a numeric up down, just like we have on the other one. Which of course again needs to be color customized to better fit our setup. This one would be here. No, actually this should be white, since that's an actual configuration thingy. Numeric up down, memory. We'll add in a descriptive label back here. Memory info. How much memory to set aside for Java to run this server. There we go. All right, so what else are we missing? We've got the custom name for it, the path, the jar name, the checkbox for the Autostart, select button, memory setup, and everything on the server config will go on this settings tab instead. So we don't really need an extra button for that. And then we'll have a common grouping for the accept and cancel buttons. So we don't need to put those inside this tab page. All right. Well, kind of depends on what part of the configuration you mean. At the moment, I'll do a quick run so you can see it. At the moment, I'll grab this one for example. Both the add and edit button here pop this window. That lets us specify some custom name for it. That's part of our configuration. Let's see, vanilla. I can't remember what it said before. We'll just call it vanilla server. There we go. So this is just the core profile for the Minecraft server itself, where it's located. On my computer, it's on my D drive in a folder called Minecraft, and this is the jar for it. So if we go here, you can see that it's sitting on my games drive in Minecraft server vanilla 1.12.2, and that's the jar for it. So that's the main configuration for it. Here's the memory setting for the Java environment, which is set as part of the command line arguments when you launch Java using this particular jar. The launcher application is Windows only. At the moment, I don't exactly plan to do any kind of Linux support because I honestly have little love for Linux and the Linux communities because of the arrogance they usually present the rest of the world. So if they want to make this work on Linux, feel free to try and see if you can basically change it over and compile it on a Linux platform. It's not something I want to waste any kind of time on. That's my personal opinion. I'm sorry if I offend someone with that opinion, but that's just it. I do know for a fact that there are C# environments for both Linux and for Mac OS platforms, compilers and development environments. I believe there are some decent ways of fairly easily copying a C# project over to any of the other platforms and do a compile there. However, most of the standard Windows controls that come with the WinForms projects might prove a little bit difficult getting those working on either of the two other platforms. But I honestly don't want to waste any kind of time doing cross-platform compatibility for this particular project. I need this final product to run on a Windows environment anyway, so nah, I'm not going to spend a month trying to get that working on other platforms, sorry. In any case, if we do a quick look here, Minecraft server, vanilla 1.12, we've got a server properties. I don't do development work professionally anymore. I basically only do it on a hobby basis because of health reasons. And that's basically all I'm going to say about it. If you want to have a more detailed discussion, we can do that after the stream. It's not something I want to put on the stream just yet. In the folder with the server, we have the server properties file, which is standard for Minecraft servers, though the contents of the server properties file may differ depending on which version of the Minecraft server we are running. For the purpose of making it faster and easier to manipulate the settings, we have the current properties setup dialog here. This one directly grabs the contents from the server properties file and puts it into this basically graphically based setup. And we'll replicate this over to the new dialog setup instead. So we still have it available for basically rapid configuration of things. At the moment, this current server configuration setup is perfectly capable of pre-generating a server properties file if it doesn't already exist with the jar. Typically, if you go out and just download the server jar for a new server instance setup, then you kind of need to start up the server to have it generate the server properties file, and then shut it down again, accept the end user license agreement by manipulating the text file that basically just holds a true false value, and then go in and change all the individual settings in the server properties file. When we built the current server configuration setup, we added in some extra features that lets us pre-create a server properties file before the server has been started the very first time. So this takes care of that particular part of the configuration. And that, of course, is something that we also want to migrate over to the new setup. So that takes care of that. The final part of the new configuration dialog is the schedule handling. At the moment, this particular profile doesn't have any schedules because we deleted it at some point, I think. I can't remember. This one is cleared as well, so all of the schedule stuff we also want to put in the new configuration dialog, so we can keep all of it contained within a single window. Um, so we'll take it from there. All right. This one should be fine. One of the pet peeves of anyone doing development is, oh, this is fine for now, we'll update it later. And then you never get to the point of actually getting it updated properly. So I promise I will get back to positioning this better, making it look nicer. The main reason I don't quite want to get into that part yet is because we still need to migrate all of the controls from this dialog and make them fit within this tab page. So this particular structure kind of dictates how big that particular tab page will become. And since all tab pages within a tab control need to be of the same size, this particular setup basically dictates the final size of all the tabs, which then of course ends up dictating where this will be positioned and what it will look like. So we kind of need to let this one control the size of it. All right. So for the new setup, I kind of want to get rid of these ugly white borders, I guess, and perhaps see if we can set something different up to make it look a little nicer. But we'll see. Okay, for the initial setup, we need the bind to IP, the information, the port we want to run this on, and whether it should run in online mode or not. There is actually one more setting that I would like to add in here, which deals with the remote console access. So we can basically configure which specific Archon port to use for this particular server profile or server instance. At the moment, it's kind of hard-coded to basically grab whatever port was configured for this server instance and add 100 to it. So the Archon port becomes 25665 instead of 565. But I think it would be better if we can pre-configure those. Main reason for doing that is because we may have to configure some firewall options to set up the port ranges to allow these applications to cross-connect and such. So it would be a little more beneficial if we can pre-configure these specific ports. And at some point we may also have to implement some extra check code that checks all the server instances for which specific ports are in use by other server instances, so we don't end up with port conflicts. Or at least can tell ourselves that, oh, you can't use that port because it's in use by that server instance. So that's another area of concern, and here we need to set this up just like we did the other one for the custom color, like so. Now we can add it. Okay. This would then be the bind to IP. Um, IP. And this, of course, is only relevant if this particular Minecraft server runs directly on an external or a wide area network IP, which, as far as I know, doesn't happen all that often. Yeah, um, I'm trying to think if I've ever seen it in a configuration somewhere. Um, I honestly can't remember any instance where this particular setting was needed, but it's in there, so we'll leave it in there. To IP, there we go, and then we'll put an info label on here describing that this should only be configured, leave empty unless you must bind to an external IP. IP leave empty. We'll call it info. There. Okay, so put that in there. And the next part we need is the port setup and a checkbox for online mode or not. For the most part, Minecraft servers usually end up being configured for online mode, specifically because when online mode is enabled, uh, the player profile that is attempting to connect to the server itself is session validated up against Mojang's authentication servers. Whereas if you leave it in offline mode, that check is not performed, which basically lets anyone with a hacked profile or compromised profile in some way join the server without any kind of authentication checks whatsoever, basically leaving the server open for attacks. So it's not something I recommend um, disabling. Should always leave your Minecraft server in online mode, at least to combat those kind of issues. Anyway, moving on. Checkbox right here, which of course will be the online mode. So perhaps we should add in a extra label to describe or recommend not going to offline mode. Nah, we'll leave it at that. Okay. Move these up a bit, get them out of the way, like so, and then we'll get back to positioning these things and getting them to look nice once we have all the controls added. Alright, next part of it is the player options stuff. I guess we could put in a label here that, yeah, well, da, 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 da. Hmm. Um, well, I'm actually kind of considering, even though I'm not too partial about the looks of the group box with the gray background thing, I'm kind of thinking about actually just adopting them anyways. because it makes the rest of it so much easier to handle. So we don't have to waste 4 or 5 episodes just getting everything else working. Yeah, I think we'll just do that. And if memory serves, copying controls like that is a bit of a hassle. Yeah, um, we'll set them up. And why is this incorrect? Huh, that is kind of weird. Oh, right. Must be because of the form setup, I guess, for color control text, like so. So if I go here and then add a group, it should still be black. Yes. No, you're supposed to be gray. Typical problem when putting in something custom. Dang it. Okay, that's definitely not gonna work. Yeah, see, this is a perfect example of the guys at Microsoft not exactly going through their code and having them inherit correctly. Because at the moment I have absolutely zero way of getting the text within this group to show up in gray like the rest of it. And that definitely is a problem. Um, So how to solve this? Well, we may end up having to do some other alternative custom stuff anyway, just to get this part working. Or accept that the surface of it has to follow standard control color themes, which kind of sucks. Well, I guess we could do these as regular colored setups. Yeah. Hmm. Um, my phone is blowing up. I will be right back. And we're back. I do apologize about that. I've been having some issues with one of the local power companies that I've tried to resolve, and it was a guy from the company, power company, calling um, to set my mind at ease that the issue has been resolved. So, okay, back to project at hand. Yeah, the issue with the group box, as we can see or could see, is that whoever came up with the group box basically hard-coded the text of the group box to use the default um, control text color configuration instead of adopting whatever the four-color property was set to. So this constitutes a bug in Microsoft's group box control that they really should have fixed a long time ago, and apparently haven't fixed. So this, of course, presents a certain problem for us since we're kind of trying to get this UI to well, have a slightly different look than what comes standard. So to solve this, we kind of need to figure out whether we want to do um, a different kind of layout to combat this particular issue, or if we should just switch back and use all the standard color themes of Windows, and um, just leave all of this stuff to follow standard theming. And I think we might just want to go do that since it doesn't really matter all that much for our configuration. So why don't we just do that? Um, yeah, let's reset all this stuff back to the default system settings. This would be control text, I believe. I can't remember. Um, yeah, those are the defaults. And then, of course, we need to do the same thing for these surfaces and all of these labels and stuff as well. Let's see, control text. They are adopted correctly. These need to be changed as well. And that one, and then this one needs to be set back to fixed 3D like this, and that one reset. There we go. The way to reset a property back to its default setting, in case you don't know, is simply just highlighting the property in the property dialog, property box, and then hitting the backspace key, and then an enter. That, for the most part, resets that particular property back to its default setting. Okay, so, and that one is already set. This one needs to be reset back to its normal setup, except for usually the back color of a tab page is set to transparent, which for the most part renders as white for some reason. Even though the actual default setting for it is the control face color. All right, settings. Yes, group box. One for the server. server, which should contain server like this, and then we'll add in all the needed controls to take care of that. The bind IP, all that stuff. Yeah. Why did I delete it before? Huh. Oh well. Still needs to go in there, so we'll re-add it. Bind to IP. There we go. We need a text box on there. Whoops. Here. And of course, bind to IP. We had the info label in there. To help remind us that we should only bind to IP if it's an absolute requirement by whatever hosting service it might be running on. For regular internet connections at home, it doesn't really matter because you have alternative equipment sitting there. So you shouldn't bind to it. We need the port setting, which I think we forgot last time around. I don't know. Port. There we go. And a numeric up down right there, which is the server port. And this one needs to be set pretty much like the other one in terms of min max, and we set the minimum to 1025 and the maximum to the size of a word. Let's see, maximum right there, minimum 25, and I do believe we did this as the default. There we go. And we can make it a little smaller. And then the checkbox for online mode. Online mode, there we go. And then we'll consider whether to put in some kind of additional information text. I'll just bunch this up together for starters, and then once we have all the controls and groups and such on here, we'll resize all of it and make it look nicer. There we go. All right. Let's see. We need another group box. Let's see. So world generation should probably be the next one. And that one has a lot of stuff in it. Level name, level type, generator settings, level seed, allow nether, spawn protection. Alright. Let's get some stuff in here. Level name. Alrighty. Like so, and a text box for it. Here, level name, and that's fine. Next one is level type, which needs a drop down. A label. Level type. And a combo box, which is the drop down thingy. drop down style, drop down list, and some kind of name, CV level type, and then the generator settings. Generator settings, which is a text box, and if memory serves, this is basically the place where the presets information goes when you create a single player game and pick one of the presets or construct your own. I think it goes into this one particular setup. Level seed is, of course, the seed that is used to generate the game world. So it's kind of important. Level seed and a text box for that. There we go. And then we need a checkbox to configure the nether. Checkbox there. Allow nether, which is the hell dimension. Allow nether whatever. Let's just copy the text from here to save ourselves a little bit of trouble. There we go. And finally the spawn protection, which contains or is just a numeric up down. Spawn protection. Go grab the text. Put it in here. There we go. And then, yeah, might as well just grab this one and then put it in here and just reset those two. There we go. And let's see if this one got a custom name. It didn't, so we'll give it one. As in spawn protection info. There we go. And then we'll go grab the text from here and put it in there. There we go. All right. That made this part a little easier. Oops. There we go. And then we'll grab the world options, which is basically just 5 checkboxes, so that should be fairly straightforward. What did this one end up? World generation. And this one would then be the world option up. Yeah, it is. It is fairly tedious. Tedious and boring, and probably also boring to watch. World options. It can be a little more interesting doing UI stuff when you go through constructing full custom elements. But again, it's another one of those really tedious things that you at times wish that you didn't ever have to go through. Yeah, exactly. Um, and one of the things that I actually do take a little bit of pride in is to um, build decent UIs that, at least to some extent, look nice, but at the same time also yield only the exact amount of stuff that should be accessible. I know that this particular configuration dialog kind of opposes that philosophy, I guess. But even though we need a lot of different settings to properly configure all this stuff, it can still be set up in a way where it's something that you can still go through and keep proper track of, even though there are a lot of options, and without having to go through 15 levels of dialogues to find that one specific setting. That's kind of why I've chosen to use these group boxes, because it does contain parts of the overall configuration a little nicer. Um, Plus, it lets us well, in one line of code, enable and disable parts of the UI as needed. So if I at some point get to um, wanting to implement something else that either needs to overlap or be placed alongside the rest of it, then I can just disable the groups and handle it that way. Um, Let's see, this one should actually be fine. They are all name configured, so why don't we just go through and grab them one at a time? There we go. Um, the aminals, we definitely want some bacon and moo in here. Monsters, and finally the command block thing. But yeah, it is tedious building UIs. Couldn't agree more. It is one of the pet hates in development, I guess. But it's got to be done, and one of the things that people usually forget about is taking the time to actually build, going through the tedium of building a proper UI for whatever it is they're creating. Um, I've seen it so many times before that, yeah, we'll fix that later, and they never get around to it before they end up releasing it, and then you end up having a UI that's completely useless because, yeah, well, it's like sticking your fingers in, I don't know, a trash can or something. Player options. Um, there we go. Well, come to think of it, we do have the whitelisting thingy here. Um, well, yeah, command line. That's kind of a thing of the past. People generally don't like using command lines, and 80% of anybody that uses a computer today is completely and utterly incapable of using a command line interface. And those that do create applications that use command lines interfaces are equally horrible at putting the command line interfaces together. Um, oh yeah, absolutely. um, there are so many horrible examples of people trying to do a command line based setup for their application, and they end up listing like 2 billion lines of options that you can set, And halfway through setting those options up, you run into the trouble that the command line application is actually not able to um, properly decipher all those command line options. So same result basically. Anyway, that's a different story. Player options. Let's see. We need to set the game mode. Let's get this set up here. Game mode. There we go. Game mode is another combo box. So we'll grab this one because it's pre-configured. Um, this would be the game, not game mode. There we go. Next one is the difficulty selection. Difficulty. But then again, doing all this tedious UI stuff, I mean, I could have done this off stream and then simply just updated the project. But on the other hand, one of the things about doing this is I kind of want to make sure that even though it may be tedious watching, um, I still think it's an important part of the development process, and that people get the right idea about what development involves. And even though this is super tedious doing, it is still part of the development process. And the idea that people basically have today, that both software and game development is like 10 mouse clicks and 50 keystrokes on the application or game is done. So I kind of want to kill that notion, because that's in no way how development actually takes place. Even though we do have fairly rapid development environments today, it's definitely not the way that um, overall development takes place, or how fast it takes place. It is a long, tedious, and sometimes annoying process to go through, and people need to know that. If someone is just beginning development and thinks that oh, you can develop an office suit in like 2 days, or you can do a full RTS game or a space flying sim in a week, then they are definitely in for a rude awakening, because things take a lot longer than people generally think. That would be the max player slots. Max player slots, like so. Player lots, S missing. There we go. Grab this one. Reset the colors back. There we go. And the view distance, which didn't get a name back there, so we'll make sure it does here. View distance, like so. And then the actual text, view distance. And grab this one so we don't have to reconfigure all of it. Boom, boom. Get rid of this. And then there is a view distance info label sitting right here somewhere. View distance info, which contains chunk radius from player, like so. Should be this one. And finally a checkbox, but we should be able to just replicate that over like so. And we are pretty much done with that. All right. Let's see. Online mode needs to be enabled, so we'll set that quick so we don't forget. Checked. And we need to set level name to world because that's what it does by default. The combo boxes we need to populate like we did previously. This one needs to be checked. There. Spawn protection is already set. What else? The rest of it is... Oh, right. We've got the player versus player. Yes and no. It is a setting that exists both server and client side. When playing a single player game, it's your actual render view distance is the one configured by the client. However, the instant you connect to a multiplayer setup, the server dictates the view distance because the view distance determines how much memory is spent per connected user. So if you set a server-side view distance of 10 chunks, then it's a 10 chunk radius, which means you actually end up having 21 by 21 chunks loaded per player. Um, so if you grab 21 times 21, you get 441 chunks being loaded per player. Now, if you have 50 players online on the server at the same time, you end up having 22,000 chunks loaded to host those 50 players. And each chunk on average eats a certain amount of memory. So let's say, for example, that each chunk eats up, I don't know, 50 kilobytes of memory. Then it's 22,050 times 50 kilobytes. That comes to a hell of a lot of memory. Setting the view distance on the server side and forcing the client to adopt that view distance both reduces the amount of data being transferred back and forth for every time the player moves from one chunk to another, and it also reduces the total memory spent on the server itself. So that's why it exists on server side as well. It's not just for the actual rendering of the graphics that make up the world. It's also to configure how much memory is spent keeping those chunks active on the server itself. We've got to add in the player versus player combat. No, I actually did get it copied over. I forgot. Yeah, my bad. Enabled, disabled. Yeah, it looks good. Last thing we need is the MOTD. However, the MOTD we probably want to change a little bit because it does offer up basically 2 lines of text that we can put on the multiplayer message of the day thing. So maybe we want to put up basically two boxes instead of just one. So we can put in those 2 lines and use those to basically construct the actual MOTD that goes in the server properties configuration file. Let's see, we need a group box. to house the MOTD stuff. MOTD message of the day. There we go. Da, 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 da. Text box. Huh. I forgot to name one of these. That would be this one, which should be generator settings. Now this one should be named. Yep. Okay. MOTD1, and then we'll do an MOTD2 as well, so we can support 2 lines. MOTD2. There we go. All right. For the MOTD stuff, we need to add in at some point the support for custom colored texts, which to some extent could be a little problematic doing, though we could potentially do some overlay stuff here, possibly do another custom user control that basically emulates, let's see, a setup like this to give us the option to basically render one of these two setups, so that we effectively have a separate control instead of a dialog that lets us do all this customization from that user control, so we don't have to pop another dialog to edit customized text like this. We'll see where we end up going with it, but that would possibly be a way to handle that particular issue, so we don't have to pop yet another window. I'm kind of trying to reduce the number of windows that we end up having to show just to do all the configuration. And I think adding in a custom user control to I guess encapsulate the custom text configuration stuff could be a decent way of handling it. In any case, for now, we need to get this laid out a little better. So let's get some more size here so we can move stuff around and get it placed a little better. Get these out of the way just for the moment. And then we'll start by setting some of this stuff up. This one actually needs to kind of follow the same size. How big did we do these? Let's see. I'll see if we can replicate. Yeah, let's just replicate the size of the other ones. That should be fine. And we'll position it here. Alright, so this group box has a size of this. So we'll grab that, make it the same size, there we go, and then we can position these individually exactly like the other ones were. So 5913. Huh. Yeah, I'm a derp. I need the position, of course, which is the location 1729. 1729, there we go. And then place the text box at 8227. There we go. And these should be more or less aligned. Grab this one. Whoa, okay. um, huh. Oh well. Grab this one, set that one up. This one was a lot bigger, but I don't think it hurts making it a little smaller. And finally, this checkbox thingy, 2096. Yeah, that should be fine. All right. That one needs to go there. And then grab the size from this one. Should be that one. There we go. Excuse me. And then we'll get these reconfigured so that one is the right location, which here. And then this one, location, 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 right there. And we may also want to grab the size of it so we can get it actually kind of, nah, we'll leave it there, that's fine. Maybe move the other ones up here so they line up with that one. Yeah, we'll do that instead. Well, some of it snaps, but I did add in some extra spacing between the controls here, so it doesn't exactly snap to those grid sizes that I chose for the original setup. So that's why I'm making sure that I'm copying over the original sizes and locations so we get a setup that's fairly identical to the original one. See, if I use the snapping feature here and the snap lines, you'll see that it has this distance, and here I believe I added a 1 or 2 extra pixel spacing just to give it a little more air, but just to keep basically the same setup, so these group boxes end up becoming placed pretty much the same way. Just copying these over to get the same kind of or the same layout for them. There we go. Here we can snap it easy. Oh, it actually did follow. Yeah. No. Distance is a little off compared to what Visual Studio really wants. This one is right there. There we go. And the same for the PvP option. There we go. Max player slots. Yeah, and all of this is really tedious doing, but it's part of the process, so we'll just have to go through it. Location, 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 right there. There we go. Like so, and this one along with this one. There we go. And then the info thingy. Copy that over. There we go. Some would argue that I could just have copied all of this and pasted it into the tab page. And yes, I could have done that. That would have completely messed up the tab order. Because for whatever reason that escapes me, when you do a mass selection of controls like this, for example, and then copy them to paste them in a different form or a different container of some sort, the Visual Studio IDE basically loops through all of them and inserts them in the reverse order of however they were inserted in the original form. But in doing so, it effectively completely reverses the tab order of things because it uh, basically forces the tab index to become the exact order those controls were inserted or added on the target container. So all of that stuff gets completely messed up when you do that. And it basically just becomes one huge jumble of things that have to be basically reconfigured. So it's just a huge mess. I'm not quite sure why Microsoft decided to do things that way, but they did, and more often than not, it causes a hell of a lot of weirdness when trying to get things realigned and reconfigured the way they were set up in the previous. Sometimes I do it this way, sometimes I copy them and then, whoops, go through and reconfigure all of the tab indexes and visibility options because they at times also get screwed up. I don't know why. It's just one of those IDE weirdness factors, I guess. Grab, oh, this one needs a size as well. Go grab this one. There we go. And location, location, location. There definitely are a lot of things that Microsoft could have done a lot better when it comes to the actual UI design part of Visual Studio. There are certain things that are still lacking that basically date back to the earliest versions of Visual Studio that they still haven't changed or put any kind of better design into. Um, it The reasons escape me, but Microsoft apparently thinks that oh, it's perfect the way it is. But then again, how many Microsoft employees actually use Microsoft's own products for whatever work they need to do? Um, I guess if they had more people working with their own products, they might have discovered some of these, how should I put this, lacking features or um, minor oversights that their products actually contain. And Microsoft is not particularly good at listening to user feedback. They never have been, and they probably never will be either. But then again, I guess it's a choice of if you can't beat them, join them. Another dimension, get that one placed, and that kind of screwed this up. So I'll grab that one. There we go. As luck would have it, that particular label was perfectly placed for me to grab. Grabba, grabba. There we go. Get this one. And I probably need to adjust the size of it a bit. No, I don't, because I copied it from here, so it should have the correct size. There we go. All right. And welcome back. And this one needs to go here. And luckily we don't have to do a lot of messing with this one. We basically just need to set the first checkbox, and then the rest of them can be lined up with the initial one. So that makes this job a little easier because we can simply just utilize these snap like so, and finally this one. There we go. Job done. The final one that we need to set up is of course message of the day, but since we are changing that ever so slightly by adding in a second box, we kind of need to make sure that we have enough room to house the second one. There, and we need the size here. Boom. And then we'll just snap this one, and we're good to go. All right. So let's get this one lined up here. Nope. Here we go. There. That looks a little better. All right. We still need to leave a little bit of space at the bottom for the accept cancel buttons. So we can put those in there. But other than that, we pretty much have a general idea of the size of each of the individual tab pages now, so we can get this part of the UI properly configured now. Before I do that though, I think it's time for a couple of minutes break for nature calls and whatever else needs done, like fetching a fresh pot of coffee. We'll get into setting this part of the UI up right after the break, and we'll be right back.